North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. In short, we de-propagandize the news for your consumption. I make commentary, but that's not news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It's the Wells Report, and it is finally finished. David Keith says hi. Yvonne Field says hi. Hi back. Thanks for joining us, David. Thanks for joining us, Evie. I appreciate it. So it's finally over. The 2022 midterm elections. It ended last night with Raphael Warnock, Democrat senator, prevailing over Republican challenger Herschel Walker. It happened yesterday. AP was the first to call the race, the Associated Press. And so the Democrats will have a 51-49 advantage over Republicans in the United States Senate. This from USA Today. The Georgia race cost $380 million in total. It did not change which party would control the Senate, but it did underscore how deeply and evenly the country is divided going into 2023. For months, the race was a tale of major contrasts. Warnock, a Baptist preacher, Walker, a former NFL star, were opposites in experience, political beliefs, and speaking styles. And these are the big takeaways from USA Today. We also have the same kind of article from CNN, but I'm interested in what your takeaways in the Georgia runoff senatorial election were. What are your big takeaways from that election? You can call me 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172, or you can join us on the chat room at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. How's it going, John Beal? Thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate it. For 2 years, the Peach State has been asked to participate in a marathon of contests. The 2020 presidential election, 2 separate 2021 Senate runoff contests, and the 2022 midterm elections, and then another runoff in 2022. Then came that happened yesterday because neither Warnock nor Walker reached the necessary 50% threshold, so there was a runoff election. But if the months of rallies, national attention, and negative ads exhausted Georgians, there was no sign of voter fatigue in the terms of showing up at the polls. Just about everybody in Georgia voted. The Georgia Secretary of State office said that roughly 3.3 million people voted, and either through absentee ballot, early voting, in person, or election day. Something else that was going on was President Trump, didn't quite show up for the runoff election. He hyped a longtime friend Herschel Walker to enter the Georgia Senate contest in this year leading up to the race, but the former president was largely absent in the final stretch. Trump never joined Walker on the campaign trail for any in-person event, as other high-profile Republicans did. He did host a tele-rally for the former football star Monday night and posted on his social media site, Truth Social. Republicans are split on the former president's campaign effectiveness as of late after a disappointing midterm. I don't know why they're talking about that. The president lost maybe 10 or 15 races. He won over 250. Really don't understand why that's coming down that way, except that the mainstream media and the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are trying to damage President Trump as much as they possibly can. And they're using whatever leverage they can based on whatever results they can. The president did lose several high-profile endorsement races that he made. That is true. But he also won a great many of them. That being said, the Warnock campaign did not mind drawing attention to Trump's online event for Walker in a December 6th tweet showing the headline about the tele-rally and featuring a photo of 2 Republicans embracing each other. It's been clear since day one of the race that Herschel Walker has always been Donald Trump's hand-picked candidate. Well, there you go. As opposed to you, Senator Warnock, being Joe Biden's hand-picked candidate. Okay, well, there you go. Warnock's victory makes him the first black senator elected to a full 6-year term in Georgia's history. The Atlanta minister, who is pastor of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. Martin Luther King presided, was already in the history books as the state's first black senator after beating Republican Kelly Loeffler in the 2021 Senate runoff. But that was to finish out the term of Senator Johnny Isakson, who resigned in 2019. By the way, Warnock is just the 11th black senator in U.S. history. What else happens in this election? Well, Georgia's runoff means nothing in terms of which party controls the Senate, but it does mean something to progressive activists. Giving Warnock a full 6-year term mattered for two reasons. The obvious one was to keep Walker out of office, they said. The other one, however, was to make sure that Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, two more conservative-leaning members of the Democrat caucus, had less power. Brandon Tucker, a senior director of policy and government affairs with Color of Change PAC, a national racial justice group, said black voters in particular were keen on how the two Democrats have stood against many progressive policy goals. It's an important insurance policy right now. Also, the last thing on the USA Today rundown of yesterday's election, Democrats ran away with the money game. Overall, Georgia was flooded with $380 million in campaign spending, which made it the most expensive race in 2022. The edge went to Warnock and the Democrats. As USA Today reported, the super PACs alone poured in $16 million more on Warnock than Walker ahead of the runoff election. The groups backing Warnock doled out roughly $40 million, while organizations backing Walker spent about $24 million. The largest came from Georgia Honor, a Democrat-aligned group that spent more than $19 million in total supporting Warnock. This, according to the Federal Election Commission. It included 1 week's worth of television ads for $5.83 million. And so there you go from USA Today. What are your thoughts? Warnock does not do Baptist any more than Wright did. Okay, she's talking about Jeremiah Wright. Is that the right guy's name? Just double checking. He was a friend of President Obama. All right. So thank you, Ann. I appreciate that. CNN says the 5 takeaways look like this. Democrats have already clinched control of the Senate with 50 seats secured last month, which would allow Vice President Kamala Harris to cast tie-breaking votes. But winning a 51st seat, thanks to Warnock's victory yesterday, comes with important benefits for the Democrat Party running the Senate and for President Joe Biden's administration. The party will now enter 2023 with a true Senate majority, one that won't require power-sharing agreements that have been in place over the past 2 years in an evenly divided chamber. That outright majority means that Democrats will have the majority on committees, allowing them to advance President Biden's nominees more easily. Let's see. The Senate Judiciary Committee, this is an example, with 22 members, will shift from a split of 11 Democrats and 11 Republicans to 12 Democrats and 10 Republicans. That removes a GOP procedural mechanism to slow down the confirmation of Biden judicial nominees. Democrat leaders, meanwhile, face a reduced risk that a single senator can hold priorities hostage, since the party can now afford to lose at least one vote. Georgia is a swing state until further notice, as long as former President Donald Trump remains an influential figure in Republican politics. Georgia is now poised to be a crucial Election Day battleground, especially when federal offices are on the ballot. Now, once again, this is CNN. This is biased, so keep that in mind. Let's see. The Democrat turnout machine strikes again. This is another takeaway from CNN. After the 2020 election, Georgia Republicans passed a controversial law that, among other things, reduced the amount of time between a November election and potential runoff, creating a condensed timeline that narrowed the window for mail-in voters and reduced the number of days to vote early in person. It did not matter. So that means all of the charges of racism and all the things that were levied against the people who actually passed those laws, all those were incorrect. So it was just unnecessary hatred being foisted on Republicans or anybody else who wanted to do something about Georgia election law. The Democrat turnout machine in Georgia over the past 4 weeks, a stunning running start that goes back years and owes heavily to the groundwork by Stacey Abrams and her allies, once again delivered in a hotly contested race that attracted tens of millions of dollars in spending by campaigns and national organizations. Okay. And let's see. They also say, as one of the major takeaways, that President Trump fumbled another Senate seat. President Trump tried to use the 2020 midterms to pack congressional minorities in state houses with allies who vowed or owed their offices to President Trump's endorsement ahead of his third run for the White House. Instead, he backed a series of flawed, controversial candidates who lost races the GOP expected to win. Well, maybe. Walker on Tuesday night joined a list that included Blake Masters in Arizona, Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, gubernatorial candidates Kari Lake in Arizona, Tim Michels in Wisconsin, and Tudor Dixon in Michigan, also Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. Those are big races. And yes, the president's endorsement did not have any kind of successful result in those races. So just to keep this fair, you need to keep something else in mind. He did win a bunch. He did, by the way, also do very, very well at endorsements around the rest of the country. There's something else that is put out here, and this is important. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp kept his distance from Walker as he coasted to re-election this year's rematch. But after that victory, Kemp more fully embraced the party's Senate nominee, despite the governor's bad blood with President Trump. Kemp's goal was to convince some of those tens of thousands of ticket splitters to support the GOP nominee in the runoff. He appeared with Walker at rallies, cut television ads with a former University of Georgia football star, even loaned the Get Out to Vote operation that helped propel him to victory to a Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell-aligned super PAC to boost Walker. It was a stark contrast from the approach taken by Trump, who held a tele rally for Walker on the eve of the election, but did little else to help in the runoff. By the way, that may be because Brian Kemp was working hard to get Walker elected. It would probably make a lot more sense for President Trump to stay out of Brian Kemp's way, a man who convincingly won his Georgia gubernatorial race. It makes far more sense for Brian Kemp to do that work instead of President Trump. So this may be something that CNN is leaving out for political / propagandist effects, but something to keep in mind. You know, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how you saw this election. I saw some things in this election too. I do believe that indeed President Trump did not have the midterm election he was hoping for. What does that mean for his future? What are your thoughts? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. That's our telephone number. You can join us on the chat room. Chat room is available at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Want to thank you very much for being with us. It's midweek already. My goodness, this week is flying by. Sort of. It's the Wells Report. Oh, my. So what's going on your weather-wise? I woke up this morning to raininess. How about you? So there you go. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about all of this. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for joining us. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. One of the things about elections these days is the nastiness involved in elections these days. It's truly amazing how people take shots at each other. Social media users, for example, unleashed on former NFL star Doug Flutie for appearing on stage with U.S. Senate candidate Herschel Walker before the Republicans' concession speech to Reverend Raphael Warnock in the Georgia runoff last night. I'm so proud of him. We're all so proud of him for what he's gone through and what he's done. Flutie said of Walker, who he called his brother for life, he gave it everything he had from day one, and he did it for all the right reasons. He cares about his state and he cares about his country. Flutie and Walker were teammates in 1985 in the New Jersey Generals, a USFL team once owned by Donald Trump. The quarterback later played in the NFL for a handful of teams, including the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. He was and remains the greatest Canadian football player in history. Ask anybody who follows the Canadian Football League. I'm talking about Doug Flutie. Social media users, former fans of Flutie, expressed disappointment that he was campaigning for the Republican candidate, making several sports jokes at his expense. Some, for example, said it was time to throw out their first box of Flutie Flakes, the player's signature box of cereal popularized during his tenure with the Bills. Let's see. Flutie Flakes has a whole new meaning. Others referenced his famous Hail Mary pass at the Orange Bowl on November 23rd, 1984, when he was the quarterback for Boston College. Dubbed the Miracle in Miami, Flutie's touchdown pass secured a 47-45 win over the University of Miami, the U. Okay, let's see. His Hail Mary now should have never counted. Really? Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of nastiness that we really don't need. And I've got to be perfectly honest with you. You know, this may be something that also started basically, I think it actually started with Ron Paul running for president a while back. Because the people, we called them Ronulans, because the people that were absolute devotees of Ron Paul, deciding that the Fed was the giant arch villain of all human civilization and so on and so on, they started taking really hard shots at people that disagreed with them. I mean, these are people that blew off friendships and so on and so forth. That kind of thing continued regarding Donald Trump. Suddenly, people that supported Donald Trump in 2016 were, for all intents and purposes, canceled. I lost a lot of friendships over that. It was amazing, in fact. It was absolutely amazing that I lost so many friendships. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I decided that since they had said that they couldn't be friends with somebody that would vote for Donald Trump, I said, okay, but you need to keep something in mind. You know, if our friendship is based on who I vote for, there's no way back through this door if you close it. And so I will tell you that those former friends of mine will remain former friends of mine. I mean, that's just the way it is. And it's too bad because they were great people to me. They were wonderful people to me until they weren't. I think that's something that we're going to have to work on in the United States when it comes to our politics. I don't know what it's going to take. But certainly the scorched earth and the smug arrogance of people willing to put American voters essentially aside as immaterial or irrelevant in our politics, and our willingness to call each other terrorists and bigots and so on and so forth, that's got to stop, because it's tearing at the fabric of our nation, don't you think? This is the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Stay right there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. If you find value in this show, please subscribe to it. Please share it with your friends. Give us a thumbs up. Those little like things, the little hearts and stuff, that really helps. I appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to support the show financially, please do so. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon.com/The Wells Report. And what you can do is you can throw us $1 a month. It's all you need to do. Trust me on this. That's all you got to do. I appreciate it. There are other people that throw some money at this show that I absolutely adore. And I want to thank everybody that contributes to the Wells Report. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. This is an independent broadcast. It's coming out of my pocket. And so if you'd like to support what we do, please do so. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report, patreon.com/The Wells Report. $1 or $2 a month would be just fine. Thank you so much. So Peru is in South America. Most of us live in North America. I'd like to get down to South America. I'd like to go to Machu Picchu. I'd like to go see all of the wonderful things in South America. I really would. I'd like to spend some time in Brazil. I'd like to spend some time in Argentina. I'd like to do all that. But Peru, on the other hand, they're having tough times. Peruvian lawmakers have voted to oust President Pedro Castillo. They are dramatically escalating today's political crisis that began hours earlier today when Castillo attempted to dissolve the legislative body and install an emergency government. Congress began its session today with lawmakers singing the national anthem. A majority of 101 lawmakers in the 130-member Congress later voted to impeach Castillo, with the body announcing that Vice President Dina Boluarte would be sworn in as the new president of Peru. The vote sent a clear message of defiance after Castillo announced plans for an early parliamentary election to work on a new constitution in a televised speech from the presidential palace, which also prompted a string of cabinet resignations and fiery reactions from top officials. Francisco Morales, the president of Peru's Constitutional Court, urged Boluarte to assume the presidency in a speech prior to the congressional vote. Boluarte on Twitter also criticized Castillo's dissolution plan. I reject Pedro Castillo's decision to perpetrate the breakdown of the constitutional order with the closure of Congress, she wrote on Twitter. It is a coup that aggravates the political and institutional crisis that Peruvian society will have to overcome with strict adherence to the law. At least 7 cabinet members resigned, including the Minister of the Environment, Wilbert Rosas, also Finance Minister Kurt Borneo, Foreign Relations Minister Cesar Landa, and Justice Minister Felix Chero. Castillo's attempt to dissolve the Congress was also condemned by international officials, with the United States urging the leader to, quote, reverse his attempt to shut down Congress and allow Peru's democratic institutions to function according to the Constitution. This was U.S. Ambassador in Peru, Lisa Kenna, on Twitter. We encourage the Peruvian public to remain calm during this uncertain time, she said. Argentina's Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed deep concern over the political crisis that the sister Republic of Peru is going through, and calls on political and social actors to safeguard democratic institutions, the rule of law, and constitutional order. The government of the leftist leader had been mired in chaos since the inauguration, with dozens of ministers appointed, replaced, sacked, or resigned in just a little over a year. It piled further pressures on the beleaguered president. Castillo, a former school teacher and union leader, had railed against the opposition for trying to remove him from the first day he was in office. He has accused Peru's Attorney General, Patricia Benavides, of orchestrating what he called a new form of coup d'etat against him through her office's investigations. In October, Benavides filed a constitutional complaint against him based on 3 of the 6 investigations her office had opened. The complaint allows Congress to carry out its own investigations against any president. Elected in 2021 in July by a narrow margin in a runoff, Castillo had faced a cascade of investigations on whether he used his positions to benefit himself, his family, his closest allies, by peddling influence to gain favor or preferential treatment, among other claims. Castillo repeatedly denied all allegations, reiterated his willingness to cooperate with any investigation. He argued that the allegations were a result of a witch hunt against him and his family from groups that failed to accept his election victory. The president faced 5 preliminary criminal investigations on allegations of masterminding corruption schemes while in office. They include prosecutors' allegation that he had led a criminal network that interfered with public institutions such as the Ministry of Transport and Communications, Ministry of Housing, and Peru's state-run oil company to control public bidding processes and benefit specific companies and close allies. Prosecutors are also investigating whether the president led efforts to peddle influence in the process of promoting officers in both the armed forces and national police. Widening beyond the president himself, these investigations also looked into his family, including his wife and sister-in-law. First Lady Lilia Paredes is being investigated on suspicion of allegedly coordinating the criminal network. Her attorney, Benji Espinoza, has stressed her innocence and argues the investigation against the First Lady includes, quote, a number of flaws and omissions. And her sister-in-law, Yennefer Paredes, is also under investigation for allegedly being part of a criminal organization, money laundering, and aggravated collusion. She was in custody until a judge revoked her preventative detention for 30 months. She, too, has denied any wrongdoing. My daughter, my wife, my entire family has been attacked with the only purpose of destroying me because they don't want me to finish my term. I promise you, I will finish my term. I am not corrupted, he said during a televised speech from the presidential palace on October 20th. In the same speech, Castillo admitted some of his closest allies should face justice over allegations of corruption, saying, if they betrayed my trust, let justice take care of them. Well, that's one of those things that you find yourself in when you are a school teacher and a union organizer and you suddenly find yourself to be the president of any nation. And so there you go. We don't pretend to understand any part of the politics having to do with Peru. All we can say is that it's always a very serious thing when a major country like Peru, and it is, finds itself in a position where it's dealing with a very serious assault on the government. And if, by the way, you are someone who is just a note for people that may be running for president in Peru in the future. If you're under investigation by the current government based on your election and so on, that's not the time to decide to dissolve the Congress and try to do something else. That's really not a smart move. While we're talking about governmental coups, did you hear about this? Thousands of police officers carried out raids across much of Germany this morning against suspected far-right extremists who allegedly sought to overthrow the government in an armed coup. Wow. Officials said 25 people were detained. It would probably take more than 25 people to overthrow the government of Germany, but, let's just give you the news. Federal prosecutors said 3,000 officers conducted searches at 130 sites in 11 of Germany's 16 states and said adherents of the so-called Reichscitizens movement, some movement members reject Germany's post-war constitution and have called for bringing down the government. Justice Minister Marco Buschmann described the raids as anti-terrorism operations, adding the suspects may have planned an armed attack on institutions of the state. Germany's top security officials said the group was driven by violent coup fantasies and conspiracy ideologies. Prosecutors said 22 German citizens were detained on suspicion of membership in a terrorist organization. 3 other people, including a Russian citizen, were held on suspicion of supporting the organization. Another 27 people are under investigation. German media outlet Der Spiegel reported the search locations included the barracks of Germany's Special Forces Unit, KSK, in the southwestern town of Calw. That's CALV or CALW. The unit received scrutiny in the past over alleged far-right involvement by some soldiers. Now, this is kind of a conversation here that we got to have. Over the years, and it probably has to do more with propaganda purposes than anything else. The Nazi Party and neo-Nazis have been sort of categorized as far-right politically. In point of fact, the Nazi Party was a socialist organization that would make them far-left. And this is something that USA Today is perpetuating. So when you start talking about these politics, you're trying. What's happening is they're trying to cast neo-Nazism as a far right political movement, which it is not. Nazism, even neo-Nazism, is far left. Always has been, always will be. Federal prosecutors declined to confirm or deny that the barracks of the KSK were searched. Along with detentions in Germany, prosecutors said one person was detained in Austria, in the town of Kitzbühel, another in the Italian city of Perugia. Prosecutors said those detained are alleged to have last year formed a terrorist organization with the goal of overturning existing state order in Germany and replacing it with their own form of state, which was already in the course of being founded. Wow. The suspects aware their aim could only be achieved by military means and with force, according to prosecutors. How they were going to do that with themselves and maybe, the 27 are under investigation. They had 24. That's not a lot of people. That's less than 55 people. You're not going to be able to take over the country of Germany with 55 people, no matter how much violence you think you can portray or perpetrate against, I don't know, the Bundeswehr. I mean, those are pretty tough dudes. I've been talking about the National Guard of Germany. They will stomp you. They just will. Some of the group's members had made concrete preparations to storm Germany's federal parliament with a small armed group, according to prosecutors. The details of this plan still need to be investigated to determine whether any of the suspects can be charged with treason. Well, okay. The group is alleged to have believed in a conglomerate of conspiracy theories consisting of narratives from so-called Reich citizens, as well as QAnon ideology. Prosecutors also added members of the group also believe Germany is ruled by a so-called deep state. Similar baseless claims about the United States were made by former President Donald Trump. That's how you know it's USA Today. That is absolute garbage. The director of the FBI was involved. The director of the CIA was involved. The acting director of the Department of Homeland Security, Rod Rosenstein, was involved. Come on, you guys. That is the deep state. Will you stop it? No, those similar baseless claims about the United States were made about this deep state garbage. No, they weren't baseless. It's hysterical. It's amazing how the mainstream media will try to do everything they possibly can to rehabilitate themselves when they screw up. Man. Prosecutors identified the suspects, the German prosecutors identified the suspects, the ringleaders, as Heinrich the 8th PR. Okay. And Rudiger VP, in line with German privacy rules. In other words, they don't let you have the last names. Der Spiegel reported the former was a well-known 71-year-old member of a minor German nobility. The latter was a 69-year-old former paratrooper. Federal prosecutors said that Heinrich 8th PR, who the group planned to install as Germany's new leader, had contacted Russian officials with the aim of negotiating a new order in the country once German government was overthrown. He was allegedly assisted in this by a Russian woman, Vitalia B. So there you go. According to current investigations, no indication that the persons contacted responded positively to his request. No, what would happen is the Russians would immediately contact the German government, who would immediately take steps just like they've done so far. Prosecutors identified another individual detained by police today as Birgit M-W, Der Spiegel reported her as a judge and former lawmaker with the far-right Alternative for Germany party. The party, known by its German acronym AfD, increasingly came under scrutiny by German security forces due to its ties with extremists. AfD's co-leaders Tino Trupala and Alice Weidel condemned the reported plans, which they said they'd only learned of through the media. We have full confidence in the authorities involved and demand a swift and comprehensive investigation, they said in a statement. So there you go. End of the year, end of the government, Peru, Germany, playing around with coups. Really? Goodness gracious. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Glad you are here. Stick around. Coming up in just a couple of seconds. AOC's under what kind of investigation? It's next. Stay put. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I was so proud of myself today when I updated my caption on my crawl across my very, very impressive looking television stuff. And then somebody pointed out, John David, you screwed it up again. And so there you go. Does that look better for everyone? Hello? Hello? Missed the backspace. Thank you, Mikey. I appreciate it. Yeah, so AOC. Yeah, AOC had some interesting things that she was being looked at over. Maybe you'd be interested. This from the New York Post. A 2-year federal probe found that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign did not properly disclose some of its expenses. That's right. The FEC, the Federal Election Commission, found that 2 political action committees, Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats, quote, did not properly disclose the purpose of the disbursements to similarly named shell companies set up by AOC's former chief of staff, Shaikat Chakrabarti, during her first run for Congress in 2018, unquote. So let's see if it wasn't AOC, if it was, say, somebody who was a Republican, this probably would have turned into money laundering or something along that line, right? Because you got campaign money being sent through shady means, through a couple of political action committees into shell companies. That looks an awful lot like money laundering. And what did the Federal Election Committee do about all that? Commission do all about that? Well, yeah. The 6-member panel voted to dismiss a government watchdog complaint against the Congresswoman's campaign and the filings that showed up last Thursday. Yeah. Actually, there are filings that will be made public. That'll be happening tomorrow. But the New York Post got an extra earlier look at it. Last week, the National Legal Policy Center, which sent its 36-page complaint to the FEC in March of 2019, filed a lawsuit against the federal agency in Washington, D.C., blasting the investigations panel made up of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans for not providing a reason for the dismissal of the complaint. 3 Democrats and 1 Republican voted to dismiss the complaint. I didn't even know that Mitt Romney was on that particular committee. The FEC has gone after a whole host of people whose violations are dwarfed by the scale of this scheme, said Paul Kamenar. He's the NLPC counsel. It appears to not be prosecutorial It appears not to be prosecutorial discretion, but prosecutorial favoritism. The NLPC complaint alleged that AOC campaign treasurer Frank Llewellyn and Chakrabarti, among others, funneled more than $1 million in political donations into 2 companies controlled by Chakrabarti. Those cash transfers from 2 political action committees to Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats may have violated the $5,000 contribution limit to federal candidates, according to the original complaint. The FEC waited more than 30 days to publicly disclose their investigative findings, according to the NLPC, perhaps in an effort to avoid a legal challenge, for a spokesman for the NLPC said. It was highly irregular for the FEC to release its statement of reasons after the deadline for us to file suit. Yeah. This according to Tom Anderson, the director of the NLPC Government Integrity Project, adding the group did not wait for the agency's findings before filing its legal challenge. So in other words, they anticipated that the FEC was going to slow walk their decisions and investigations and allowed for it. Very interesting. What does that mean? Well, what it means is something that I've been saying for a long time. If you're going to go after these people, you got to be smarter than they are. Fortunately, it's possible. And so once again, AOC, no problem. It's okay because she's progressive. She's a Democrat. And she professes to be the possessor of a juicy booty, which has always been disturbing to me. Not her actual booty, but the fact that you would refer to herself that way. That's like, seriously? Really? Congresswoman? I mean, seriously? One of my best friends in politics is Beth Van Dyne. You know, Beth Van Dyne is far too classy. Far too classy, far too mature, far too, I don't know, what's the word? She's just an amazing human being. She would never refer to herself like that. It's absolutely outlandish what AOC does and how she gets away with it. And it just tells you something about Queens. You know, they have put her in office for the 3rd time. This is the 3rd time they've elected her, okay? It's like, my goodness gracious. Yeah. My goodness gracious. That's that one hand washing the other thing, I suppose, huh? Man. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Lots of news today, and we are bringing it to you, including 2 international coup attempts. Really? Whoa. Let's see. AOC is whatever the left wants her to be. Yeah. No impeachment is going to be convicted unless it's President Trump. Let's see who else. Never forget because, Pearl Harbor Day. Yeah, we'll be talking about that coming up a little bit later on the Wells Report. That'll be happening in the third hour of our broadcast today. Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. This is the end of hour number 1 of this broadcast. 2 more to go. Thanks very much for being a part of our show. Back with more coming up in just a moment. Oh, very cool. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday. Wonderful Wednesday. Back in a moment. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. I make commentary. That's not news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. And you can find us, well, where you found us right now. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can also find us on Patreon and Rumble. Patreon and Rumble. Patreon and Rumble. Patreon and Rumble. Patreon and Rumble, by the way, if you are watching us on Patreon and Rumble, thank you very much for doing so. This broadcast was recorded earlier in the day for your perusal at this time. All right. Let's get on with the news. President Trump all of his properties have been searched again. Absolutely true. And they were searched because his lawyers arranged for it. Yeah. President Trump has searched himself and all of his properties, by the way. And it's reported in CNN Politics. All right. 2 documents with classified markings were found in a Florida storage unit during a search by a team hired by former President Donald Trump's lawyers. This is a person familiar with the situation. Those documents were handed over to the FBI immediately. No other documents with classified markings were found during a search of 4 of Trump's properties, according to the source. The discovery of the documents was first reported by the Washington Post. The team of 2 searched Trump Tower in New York, the Bedminster Golf Club, an office location in Florida, and a storage unit where the 2 documents were found and where the General Service Administration had shipped President Trump's belongings after he left the White House. The General Services Administration. The 4 searches came amid lingering concerns from the Justice Department that not all documents had been returned to the federal government. Carried out in recent weeks, the searches were overseen by Trump's legal team. This, according to another source familiar with the matter, talking to CNN. Trump's attorneys offered to let the federal investigators observe the search at his Bedminster property. The offer was declined. Given the Justice Department response, Trump lawyers did not make a similar offer for the search of the other properties. It would be highly unusual for the Justice Department to observe searches that aren't conducted by law enforcement. The department declined to comment. Stephen Chung, a spokesperson for Trump, said the former president and his counsel continue to be cooperative and transparent. It is unclear what the subsequent contact between the Trump legal team and the federal investigators has been since the searches. CNN previously reported exclusively that President Trump's legal team was considering allowing federal agents to search Mar-a-Lago again to satisfy the Justice Department's demands that all sensitive government documents be returned. The matter was addressed in a court proceeding this fall, where the Justice Department asked a judge to issue an order compelling the Trump team to arrange for another search. And so the president is working as hard as he can to make sure that that happened. Now, that was reported by CNN. This is the New York Times version of the article. Former President Donald Trump hired people to search 4 properties after being directed by a federal judge to look harder for any classified materials still in his possession. They found at least 2 documents with classified markings inside a sealed box in one of the locations. This, according to a person familiar with the matter. Mr. Trump's search team discovered the documents at a federally run storage site in West Palm Beach, Florida. That prompted his lawyers to notify the Justice Department about them. The New York Times reported in October, Justice Department officials told the former president's lawyers they believed that he might have more classified materials that were not returned in a response to a subpoena issued in May. The FBI searched Mar-a-Lago, Mr. Trump's private club and residence in Florida, in August for additional classified documents and other presidential records. People close to Mr. Trump had said earlier today that no classified material had been found during the searches, a claim that was later proved incorrect. The Washington Post first reported the location of the 2 additional documents, as well as searches of the properties. After warnings from the Justice Department, a debate ensued among Mr. Trump's lawyers about whether to bring in an independent firm to conduct a search. The discovery of the documents at the storage unit maintained by the Federal General Services Administration came during a series of wider searches that were completed around Thanksgiving and conducted at Mr. Trump's golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, at Trump Tower in New York, and a storage closet at Mar-a-Lago. This, according to two people familiar with the events. Stephen Chung, the spokesperson for Trump, said that the former president and his counsel continue to be cooperative and transparent, as we just reported. And he moved on in this particular version of the story to say, despite unprecedented, illegal, and unwarranted attacks against President Trump and his family by a weaponized Department of Justice. The department is investigating the former president's handling of thousands of government documents, including more than 300 classified ones that were taken from the White House at the end of his term and were found at Mar-a-Lago. Prosecutors are also seeking to determine whether Mr. Trump obstructed the government's repeated efforts to retrieve the materials. When the Justice Department warned that it believed that Mr. Trump had documents still in his possession, a lawyer with whom he had hired a short time earlier, Christopher Kise, suggested, along with other lawyers working for Mr. Trump, they engage an outside firm, according to people familiar with the events. A cadre of other Trump lawyers were resistant to the idea. Among them was Boris Epshteyn, a communications advisor who has positioned himself as an in-house counsel on some of Mr. Trump's legal entanglements. The dispute led Mr. Kise's standing in the Trump circle to be diminished for weeks, according to several people close to the president. More recently, Chief Judge Beryl Howell of the Federal District Court in Washington, who oversees grand jury investigations, directed Mr. Trump's lawyers essentially to search more carefully for any remaining documents. Other lawyers in Mr. Trump's circle took on the issue and hired a firm, according to one of the people familiar with the matter. But while the Justice Department has continued to have questions about the documents that might remain at Mar-a-Lago, and while some people close to Mr. Trump believe another search warrant might be executed, a person familiar with the discussions among federal officials said that there was no recent probable cause by which to obtain a warrant for Bedminster or Trump Tower. In other words, the president is doing this all by himself. The National Archives reportedly asked last year about the status of some materials that it should have received, such as correspondence with Kim Jong-un, North Korea's leader, as well as about 24 boxes that were deemed presidential records at the end of President Trump's term. Archive officials conducted several people trying to facilitate the return of the documents. That included former White House counsel office lawyers working as Mr. Trump's representatives with the agency. The former president maintained two several advisors. The boxes were filled with news clippings and personal effects. Archive officials explained the news clippings can be considered presidential records. Of course. Alex Cannon, a lawyer who had worked for Mr. Trump in various capacities, became involved last fall and tried to help archives officials retrieve the material. Mr. Cannon warned others in Mr. Trump circles not to go through the boxes themselves because it was unclear what was in them and the people might require security clearances. At one point, as Mr. Trump sought National Archives documents related to the investigation into whether his 2016 campaign conspired with Russian officials, he proposed that his lawyer suggest a trade with the agency, what he sought in exchange for the documents that he had. The lawyers declined to engage in that suggestion. Mr. Cannon continued to try to push for the documents returned to the archives. Eric Hirschman, a lawyer who had worked with a top advisor in the Trump White House, had an informal conversation with Mr. Trump. People familiar with the discussion characterized it as Mr. Hirschman speaking as a friend and urging the former president to return the boxes, suggesting he could be subject to legal trouble by keeping them, especially if they contained classified material. That possibility became reality in January after the archives officials received boxes Mr. Trump had gone through over several days in December. The officials opened the boxes, discovered a number of classified documents. The Justice Department became involved. When Mr. Cannon raised the prospect with Mr. Trump that officials were uncertain that they had everything returned, the former president told him to tell officials that he had given everything back. According to people briefed on the matter, Mr. Cannon refused to do so and soon stopped being involved. And so there you go. That is the very latest when it comes to President Trump. And so he's in a position where he is doing what he can, certain due diligence and doing whatever he can to make sure that he is complying with the idea of getting back anything that might have classified material markings on it. All right. Now, what's fascinating to me is whether or not the Republican Party during the House of Representatives, I wonder whether they're going to make any contacts with President Trump or President Bush or President Clinton to see just exactly how much classified material they have in their possessions. That would be something that I would do if I was up there, just to keep things chilly. And I guarantee you that those presidents have that material with them. They do. Just like all presidents do, they are more memento than actual actionable intelligence. But that's one thing that's been missing out of all of this is, okay, since we can't know what these particular classified materials deal with, the Justice Department really doesn't have to get much beyond the outrage of, my God, they're SCI, TSSCI. My God. Well, yeah, okay, but what do they actually involve? Now, that's something that will happen in a court of law if indeed they decide to indict the former president, which, once again, that is a very serious stretch. They're going to have to really come up with something pretty serious to be able to indict a former president. And that's, like I said before, not something that I'm a big fan of. Not at all. And a lot of people say, well, okay, they put all these cards on the table. You know, they put all these cards on the table with President Trump. They've established all these precedents with regards to what the Congress can do with presidents. Yes, they have. They absolutely have. But the problem with all that is that that history will judge these presidents far more harshly than American law or American courts, or to the benefit of them. Their legacy is something that is essentially what they have to deal with for all of time. And that's why presidents, because of basic understandings that politics is savage and terrible and rotten and awful, and because politics being those things, presidents need to be able to have some kind of protection from it. And up to this point, up until President Trump, those presidents had enjoyed that protection. But when President Trump, who, by the way, was the enemy of not just Democrats, but also Republicans as well, when he became the president, then it was Katie bar the door. And that's exactly what's been happening. I can't help but reach back into my very short-term memory and saying, let's see. So AOC mishandled $1 million worth of campaign donations, and the FEC said, huh. Okay. Well, I'll just put that out there for whatever that's worth. It's worth an awful lot to AOC, but not worth too much to President Trump, I assume. But you do see the hypocrisy, right? You do, right? Yeah, that's good. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of seconds as we bring you the news for the 7th day of December. It's Pearl Harbor Day. Back with more in a moment. Okay. Hang on. I'll call you right back, okay? That is Kelly Lyons. She's in the hospital today. She's getting some work done. And she was just calling to make sure that everybody knew that she was doing fine and well and okay and all that. Thanks very much, Ms. Kelly. Sincerely appreciate it. Hope you feel better beginning instantly. That's not good stuff to do. I'm just telling you. It's really hard to do. So anyway, Kelly Lyons, who works for the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and is a dear friend of not just the Wells Report, but the Wells. She knew me long before I did the Wells Report. She is doing just fine for all of us who know her. And those people listening at ODOT, Kelly's okay. All right, so there you go. All right. Now, there is something going on here that I think that Democrats and the mainstream media need to be careful of. This, by the way, is coming to us from the Washington Post. Democrats on a pair of congressional committees have launched an aggressive new effort to obtain information about whether Jared Kushner's actions on U.S. policy in the Persian Gulf as a senior White House advisors were influenced by the bailout of a property owned by his family's business. Citing previously undisclosed emails and other documents related to former President Donald Trump's son-in-law, the committees on Monday night sent letters to the state and defense departments requesting material they say could shed new light on whether Kushner's financial conflict of interest may have led him to improperly influence U.S. tax, trade, and national security policies for his own financial gain. The letters, obtained by the Washington Post, focus on efforts by Kushner and his father, Charles Kushner, to bail out a troubled 41-story Fifth Avenue office building in New York City. The Kushner Company in 2018 made a deal with a Canadian company, Brookfield Asset Management, which invested $1.2 billion for a 99-year lease. As a result, the Kushner family company avoided defaulting on a loan that was due the following year. The Democrats have long raised questions about the deal because of the Qatar Investment Authority, a sovereign wealth fund, had a stake in one of Brookfield's investment arms. In other words, the Canadian company. Brookfield said that when it was negotiating his deal in 2018, no Qatar-linked entity has any involvement in or even knowledge of this potential transaction. But that doesn't mean anything to Democrats. They've continued probing whether any Qatari money went into the project. Now, Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon and Representative Carolyn B. Maloney of New York, in their roles as chairs of the Senate Finance Committee and House Oversight Committee, have broadened that inquiry, co-authoring letters to the state and defense departments. They wrote that they are seeking an array of documents or addressing their concerns that Jared Kushner's role in Middle East policy could have played a role in the bailout. Neither Jared Kushner, who now runs a private equity company, nor Charles Kushner, who serves as chairman of the Kushner Real Estate Company, responded to requests for comment. The saga of the Fifth Avenue property has long been one of the darkest chapters in Jared Kushner's career. Where did that come from? After his father went to prison for federal tax evasion and other charges after being convicted in 2005, Kushner, who is married to Trump's daughter Ivanka Trump, remade the family real estate business. He sold many of the company's New Jersey apartments and paid $1.8 billion for the Fifth Avenue property, the most ever paid in the United States for an office building at the time. While Kushner called it a great acquisition, the purchase came just before the 2007 real estate crash, undercutting the value of the property and putting the family business at risk. As Kushner recounted in Breaking History, his recent memoir, there was no way I was going to let the investment fail. I had very little leverage. I was willing to talk to anybody. He called it the biggest challenge of his career. By 2016, he was simultaneously helping to run Donald Trump's presidential campaign and seeking an investor to take over the property. A previously undisclosed email obtained by the committee said that Kushner talked with top Brookfield officials about the Fifth Avenue property on April 15, 2016. The property at the time was known as 666 Fifth Avenue, now known as 660 Fifth Avenue. And so all I can say is the Democrats better be very, very careful when it comes to taking shots at the sons or son-in-laws of presidents. They probably ought to have cleaner hands than that, wouldn't you think? This is the Wells Report. We will be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We report the news honestly and fairly. We de-propagandize the news. And we point out things that are, shall we say, more political than helpful. Like this, for example. San Francisco Mayor London Breed has opened up an investigation into Twitter, now owned by Elon Musk. Now, this the timing of this obviously is cogent, insofar as Elon Musk has found that Twitter was indeed censoring the people of the United States. That being said, the left now in trouble based on what Elon Musk knows and what he's been able to ascertain based on his takeover of Twitter. The actual San Francisco mayor is doing everything he can to create as much trouble for Elon Musk as possible. Listen to this. The San Francisco Department of Building Inspection is launching an investigation into Twitter over reports the tech company converted several office rooms into bedrooms for employees. This, according to KQED, which is the national public broadcasting station in San Francisco. This, according to KQED supervising senior editor Ted Goldberg. The department, in a comment to KQED, said it's reaching out to building management to set up a site inspection and needs to make sure the building is being used as intended. Yeah. Apparently, in the building, you have to use it for office stuff, so you can't necessarily create a place for people to lay down and sleep. Huh. Responding to Goldberg's tweet about the story, Elon Musk tagged Breed and linked to an article from the San Francisco Chronicle about a baby's reported fentanyl overdose on a city playground. So, City of San Francisco attacked companies providing beds for tired employees instead of making sure kids are safe from fentanyl. Where are your priorities at London Breed, said Musk. Several other prominent Twitter users also slammed San Francisco for opening the investigation, some wondering whether Musk would move his company's headquarters out of California. Why not? Reporter Tatiana Pasalic, quoting David Radcliffe, Google's vice president of real estate and workplace services, said no workplace is complete without a nap pod. A nap pod. I've been in radio for almost half a century. There has never been, as far as I know, a nap pod available at any of the radio stations that I worked at. Now, I will do this. I will say this. There was a private office available to the general manager of one radio station that I worked in Atlanta, which was very, very cool. Yeah. Mike says nap pods right next to the wine on tap. Yeah, and the $400 lunches catered for 12 people. Yeah, I mean, Twitter was a cool place to work. There's no doubt about it. Anyway, looks like we need cops to investigate more than just Elon. Workers' rights must not be violated, she added, linking to a Yahoo News article titled, "You Can Nap on the Job at These 10 Companies." The article included several high-profile companies like Uber and Nike. Yeah. I really like this, by the way. This is responsible journalism going on here. People who have worked in tech for years are reading this thinking, wait, sleeping in your office isn't allowed, said Redwood City Mayor Giselle Hale. Caitlyn Jenner, who has owned businesses in California for decades, called it the worst state for labor laws. Ridiculous. Nap and rest spaces are incredible benefits to employees, also not uncommon. Major California and entitled snowflake-inflicted labor issue yet again. Worst state for labor laws ever. The story that Musk had outfitted Twitter's headquarters with bedrooms for employees was originally broken by Cyrus Farivar and Catherine Schwab of Forbes magazine. Elon Musk's extremely hardcore vision of Twitter seems to have manifested itself in sad little conference room sleeping quarters at the company's recently depopulated headquarters, said Farivar and Schwab. Yeah. The rooms allegedly featured unmade mattresses, drab curtains, and large conference room monitors. The outlet withheld the name of their source over fear of reprisal. The next day, San Francisco opened its investigation. Okay. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about this. All right? Is this okay with you? If you are a Democrat, if you're somebody who believes that everything left is right, are you okay with all this? Are you all right with it? Do you think that Elon Musk deserves to be chased down by every little whatever organization from whatever city he's doing business in? Is this something that you think makes California a better place to live or a worse place to live? Does Twitter need to stay in California? The answer is no. Now, there are a lot of people on the street in California that used to work at Twitter. That's true. So California is really not in a position where losing Twitter would be a big deal, except from a publicity standpoint. But seriously, why would Elon Trump want to continue doing this? I mean, he brought his aerospace business out of California to Texas strictly because of all of this. Is this going to happen more or less? I would expect it's going to happen more. But what I'm trying to figure out is this. Are we now in a situation where if you go against any part of the political orthodoxy, that you can expect all manner of trouble from the IRS to the EPA to OSHA to just about everybody? Is that where we are now? And I'm not talking about particular presidents or particular parties throwing this stuff away at other people. We've got to stop this. We have to stop this garbage right this minute. We absolutely do. The use of public offices is not designed as some way of getting back at your political enemies. It doesn't make any difference who you're dealing with. Oh, did I say Elon Trump? I'm sorry. Elon Musk. Yeah, thank you, Isaac. I appreciate that. Well, there's so many people. I mean, look at President Trump. President Trump took on the left. Look at what's been happening to him ever since. No president, while in office or after leaving office, has had to deal with any of the things that Donald Trump has at all. It has, I mean, even up to and including the Clintons, who, by the way, actually walked away with White House furniture. They didn't have to deal with any of this stuff. And so we find ourselves in a position where politicians believe that, I guess it's their sole right to be able to use the power and trappings of their office to stomp on their political enemies. And you can see that every single day. I mean, now we're sitting here watching Democrat congressmen going after Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner went into the Middle East and brokered historic international agreements that made the Middle East less volatile, less dangerous. He actually brokered peace deals between Qatar and Israel and laid the groundwork for a normalization of relationships between Israel and a whole bunch of Arab countries that could absolutely have nothing to do with Israel. The anti-Israeli bigotry so prevalent in the Arab world just wouldn't allow it. And that's what Jared Kushner did while he was a part of the Trump administration. He was one of those guys that was able to say, hey, let's take a look at this a little different way. That is history making. Naturally, stuff that you don't hear anything about having to do with the Trump administration, because the Trump administration has to be stomped into oblivion as quickly as humanly possible. Is it because it was such a terrible administration? No. No, it did wonderful things for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But the Trump administration made one very serious mistake. They showed everybody in the United States not just how deep and ugly and slimy and terrible the Washington, D.C. swamp was. He also showed the American people that they didn't need the swamp to be able to have a better country. And for those two sins, he is barked at to this very day. And now, Elon Musk. Elon Musk is in a position where he has very serious information that is heretofore being ignored by everybody except Fox News. And what is that information? It is the information that the federal government, interacting with social media, censored negative information about the family of the candidate president of the Democrat Party. They censored it. And it wasn't just these private companies making these decisions. The FBI was telling them, hey, you better be careful of this stuff. This could be hacked material. It doesn't make any difference whether it's hacked material or not. The Pentagon Papers, Daniel Ellsworth, any of those words ring a bell? That was hacked information. Any information that is given by a whistleblower to anybody, whether it's a government entity or whether it's a journalistic entity, that's all hacked material. So the FBI said, well, this could be the result of a hack, so you can't. But the thing about it is that they had Hunter Biden's laptop the whole time. In other words, the FBI lied. They lied to Facebook. They lied to Twitter. They lied to Google. They lied to all of these social media companies. They lied to all of them. And why? It was for political reasons. It was to extend a political advantage to the Democrat presidential candidate. And that was all. That was all there was to that. And Elon Musk, who was in a position where Elon Musk takes over Twitter, as soon as he took over Twitter, he became public enemy number one for the left and the mainstream media. And I was sitting there going, why are they losing it so much? Well, now we know why. Now we know why they're losing it. Make no mistake that the American people were subject to censorship of any story, let alone the Hunter Biden story, of any the censorship of any news story perpetrated on someone who could have published it. In other words, a publisher like Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc. by the FBI represents the biggest political scandal in the history of the United States of America. Make no mistake, that's what this is. That's what this is. Because it involves the mainstream media, the FBI, and our government. It's awful. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. If you find value in this show, please share it with your friends. Share it. Send it along to them. Subscribe. Ask them to subscribe. If you find thumbs up worthy content on this broadcast, please, by all means, give us a thumbs up. Send us a like. That does matter, by the way, in case you're wondering. And if you'd like to support the show financially, go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. That's patreon.com/The Wells Report. There's a way that you can throw us a buck or two, whatever, a month. And you can sign up for that, and it's no big deal. And I've been doing it for a long time. I'm actually a Patreon or a patron of Subbrief with Aaron Amick, who is a dear friend of mine. and is a guy who has really helped me out on in this brave new world of podcasting and so on and so on. So this news broadcast every single day might be worth $1 or $2. So if you feel like doing it, by all means, please do share that with us if you can. It's $1 every 30 days. It's not that big a deal, I don't think. If it is, don't do it. Okay? Just send what you can. I'd appreciate it. Speaking of San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors a little while ago voted 8-3 to approve a policy where the San Francisco police could use police robots and arm them with deadly force capability. And everybody pretty much lost their mind. Well, you're not going to believe this, but yesterday, those very same San Francisco Board of Supervisors officials voted unanimously against the policy that they voted on just days before. Yeah, before the vote last week, supervisors amended proposals to specify that officers could use robots only after trying alternative force or de-escalation tactics, and that only a limited number of high-ranking officers could authorize a deadly force robot's use. Robots would allow police to scope out potentially dangerous scenes while officers stay back, which they can do anyway. The San Francisco Police Department said it had no plans to arm the robots with guns, only wanted to be able to place explosives on them so that they could be used to contact, incapacitate, or disorient violent, armed, or dangerous suspects when lives are at stake. This, according to police spokesperson Allison Maxey. Now, remember something I pointed out, that this did not start in San Francisco. The use of police robots in deadly force situations started here in Dallas. We had a sniper that was taking out police officers, and they pushed him into a parking garage, and they sent a police robot up there to him with explosives and blew him to kingdom come. I had real problems with it at the beginning of, I had real problems, and I still do. I have real problems with deadly force robots. Because if there happened to have been a malfunction, whose fault would it have been? The operator of the robot? The maker of the robot? Whose fault would it have been? The answer is no one would have known. And therefore, it seems to me that if you are going to take someone's life, the search to find out who's responsible for actually carrying that out should be very, very short and very, very obvious. That's what I think. How about you? Anyway, San Francisco Police Chief William Scott said the debate over robots had become distorted. The narrative being driven in is a distraction from the real issue, which is having the tools necessary to prevent loss of innocent lives in an active shooter or mass casualty incident. We want to use our robots to save lives, not take them. To be sure, this is about neutralizing a threat by equipping a robot with a lethal option as a last case scenario, not sending an officer on a suicide mission. No, you do not need to have a robot with a lethal option. You don't need to have a robot with a lethal option. Okay? You don't. All you really need to do is just have the robot climb all over the guy. They weigh several hundred pounds. That's probably all you'd need to do. And if you had one that was quick enough, you could perhaps chase the suspect all over the place, or herd the suspect into a place where your police sniper that is handily provided for circumstances just like the chief is talking about can end the event. None of us have a problem with that. None of us do. If you're taking out police officers and you are a target for a sniper, you're about to go to sleep. And no one will argue with that. But this armed robot jazz, No go. No go. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. I certainly hope that you're having a good Wednesday. I appreciate it. I do. Let me look at that. Let me look at that camera. I use this office for my Teams meetings from time to time, and people are quite impressed with my ability to do this and then do this. I don't know why, but they are. It's one of those things. It's like magic. It's not magic. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with hour number 3 coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay. So what do you think so far? Are you guys happy? I hope so. See you in a couple of little bits. Bye-bye. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do we do here? Well, we report the news. Today's news. We report it honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. Then I make commentary. That is not news. That's just my opinion. Just like your opinion, just as valuable to everybody as people believe it to be. And therefore, we can debate. News, analysis, commentary, debate is what we do here on the Wells Report. And since I am someone who has been doing this job for a very long time, I've been doing the Wells Report by itself for almost 22 years. But I've been doing radio for nearly a half century. Next year, I will celebrate 50 years in radio. I started when I was 15. And because I've been doing this a while, I've seen a lot of things. And moreover, there are a lot of things that I've never seen before. And that kind of perspective, I think, is semi-valuable-ish. Only to me, but you might think so too. And in that spirit, I'm thinking about bringing some of this to you. What I have not seen in the American lexicon is the willingness for so many people to allow non-parents to have so much to do with children in our society. Talking about teachers. I'm talking about people in their lives, our children's lives, that are there as a fiduciary. What happened a few years ago, about 20 or so, is that there was this somehow mistaken belief, and it started with little boys in school, that little boys were all hyperactive and they were obnoxious and they were terrible and so on and so forth. And the only thing that we could do is we could have to identify that they had some kind of a mental affliction. And so attention deficit disorder was created out of whole cloth. They called it hyperactivity before because kids just had way too much energy to be able to sit down and not do anything. But now what they had to do is they had to call it something, well, that was easier to understand, I guess. A little less subjective. Attention deficit disorder. Your kid can't pay attention. Yeah. And so they came up with all kinds of things to help kids pay attention. They came up with this whole range of drugs that make even the simplest mathematics to be irresistibly interesting. 5 + 6. Wow. And the thing about it is that they took the diagnosis of ADD, they took the diagnosis out of the hands of pediatricians and put them in the hands of teachers. And suddenly teachers were saying, this kid's just not teachable. He's got ADHD. ADD at the time. ADHD came up later. Well, because ADD was, well, isn't that pretty much just self-discipline? I mean, I had an entry on my report card about self-discipline. Okay? That's how we dealt with it when I was going to school, because your parents would yell at you if you had a low grade in self-discipline. There's also another one, citizenship. So, what we ended up doing was we ended up allowing teachers to start diagnosing things. Strangely enough, by the way, there were federal programs that would send schools more money to be able to take care of these poor kids that had ADHD. Yeah, they'd send them federal money. So it was a money-making operation that the teachers be able to diagnose these kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so we had an entire group of kids that we're all on these drugs, and some of them still remain on these drugs, and it is ridiculous. But then again, we have something new, and that is gender dysphoria. But we don't call it gender dysphoria. No, we don't. No, what we do is we call it gender expression. You see, we only have two different kinds of bodies, innies and outies. But there are some innies that think they're outies and some outies that think they're innies. And there are all kinds of different ways to describe different people with different ideologies about their innies and outies. And therefore, what we have is we have a whole bunch of different genders. And of course, we have to have pronouns because he and she just doesn't fit if you are confused about innie and outie. And so, and then of course, we got to have people that are outies that want to go compete with innies and set world records for any athletic competition and basically blow up Title IX and all the other things that were there to help innies, have an equal playing field. And anybody who pointed out the fact that 6'7" dude, that 6'7" female that does not have outie parts or innie parts, but does have outie parts, anybody that said that that's a guy was immediately ridiculed and immediately stomped upon as being transphobic. Yeah. You are outside the LGBTQPRSTUVWXYZ spectrum. You don't use the right pronouns for these people. You are an absolute disgusting, trivial, horrifyingly awful person. And that's kind of sort of where we are now. Except the left is about to totally and completely destroy themselves, which is what they normally do. And they're going to do it by going after prepubescent kids and trying to screw up their minds about whether they're boys or girls. And they're doing it at virtually every possible level, at every possible opportunity. And they're going to turn themselves into social pariahs if they don't stop. The American Girl doll brand is the latest to cause a ridiculous and stupid, unnecessary outrage over a book aimed at kids that discusses gender issues, including advice on transitioning and information about puberty blockers. It's a 96-page book, quote, a smart guide, body image, unquote. It has a section featuring transgender rights flag and an image of a youngster apparently talking to a doctor about gender issues. The text discusses pronouns such as they to describe oneself and describes that studies show that transgender and non-binary kids who get help from doctors have much better mental health than those who don't, unquote. That is garbage. People who have gender dysphoria do not have any kind of mental health. It's the exact opposite of mental health. They are so confused, and they are reminded of their confusion and reminded of their deficits every moment for every possible reason. They're wearing the wrong clothes. They're going to the wrong restroom. When they go to the restroom, they see the wrong equipment, both in porcelain and in biology. They have a horrifyingly terrible life. And nobody, especially toy makers or teachers, can deal with any of it. The only people that can deal with people that have this affliction are complete and total professionals. Toy makers are not them. The progressive message aimed at youngsters from a company better known for selling high-priced wholesome dolls has angered some parents Incredibly disappointed in your book Body Image. Let these little girls be little girls. Stop the disgusting push to introduce topics too mature. It's not your place. One mother wrote on Twitter. The book explains to its targeted audience of girls 8 to 11 that the way you show your gender to the world through clothes and behaviors is your gender expression. Your gender expression can be feminine, masculine, or somewhere in between. And it might change. Maybe you'll experiment with bright dresses and long feminine hairstyles, or you'll try baggy shorts, plaid skirts, a buzzed haircut, and Birkenstocks. Okay, I added that. That was just. Your gender expression could make you feel at home in your body, the book states, according to the Daily Mail. Parts of your body may make you feel uncomfortable. You may want to change the way they look. That's totally okay. No, it's not. You don't get to tell my daughter or my son, aged 8 to 11, anything about the way their body looks or the way it doesn't look, or whether they think it's okay or whether they don't think it's okay. It's none of your damn business. If you do that, I will stomp you in every possible conceivable way. And it will be expensive, and it will be embarrassing, and it will be the end of your company. You can appreciate your body for everything it allows you to experience and still want to change certain things about it, the book advises. None of your business. None of your business. None of your business. After word of the book spread, irate parents took to social media to question its appropriateness. Some even left negative reviews on American Girl's website, claiming they are so angered they will now boycott the brand entirely. How sad. The book tells the children that there are medicines to stop puberty, or if parents won't listen, seek organizations that will. It's all gender related. How sad this world is becoming that an American doll takes on the role of thinking they should give gender assignment advice in a book. Shame on you. You better leave our children alone. And you better start doing it right now. Or everything that you have worked for is going to get swept aside into a gigantic bin and thrown into the deepest part of the ocean. You're screwing yourselves up. What happens to anyone after they turn 18 is up to them. Anything that happens to anybody under the age of 18, well, that's the purvey of parents. Not teachers. Not educators. Parents. If parents believe there's a problem with what their child having to do with, say, gender dysphoria, it's up to them to find professional help. Not a teacher that will teach the kids to go around their parents to do something that will what? Make it possible for somewhere down the line for somebody in the LGBT community to have a date? What am I getting wrong? Please, by all means, share it with me. Telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. This is The Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Yeah. So these people are coming after our children and doing their absolute dead level best to mangle them. And they need to stop. And I'm not trying to be threatening here. What I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to say, hey, bad things happen to people who push these agendas. Well, what kind of bad things, Mr. Redneck Military Buzzcut Guy? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Loudoun County School Superintendent Scott Ziegler has been fired by the school board. It happened last night. It's in response to that big mess that he got involved in where he had some trans kid that was going to a couple of his different schools in his particular district. And this guy dressed up like a girl, walked into a girl's bathroom and sexually assaulted one of them. Father showed up at the school board, ended up getting wrestled to the floor and dragged out by police, arrested, and so on. This caused, of course, all kinds of things. The National School Board Association saying, my God, these people are domestic terrorists. It cost Terry McAuliffe his reelection as governor of Virginia when he said that parents should have nothing to do with what their kids are being taught. Oh, yeah? Gone. And now, Scott Ziegler, who, after this guy said, hey, this guy sexually assaulted, he raped my daughter. Oh, no, he didn't. That didn't happen. So the kid went to a different school. Very, very hush-hush, very on the down low. Let's get this kid out of here. And then he went to another school and raped another girl. Oops. The Northern Virginia district drew national attention last year when a father accused it at a school board meeting of covering up his daughter's sexual assault. A biological boy wearing a skirt raped her in the girl's bathroom. The suspect then transferred to another school in the district and assaulted another school. He now faces charges in both cases. The father alleged the district had attempted to cover up his daughter's assault to advance its transgender policy, which, of course, is what it was doing. By the way, that policy had also been subject to parental protests at LCPS school board meetings. So what happened? Why, all of a sudden, did Scott Ziegler get canned? Well, because as a part of the charges of this kid who kept raping girls while dressed as a girl, a grand jury got involved. And a grand jury put out a report. And the grand jury report caused Loudoun County School Superintendent Scott Ziegler to become past tense. Yeah, the grand jury report released said the district was looking out for its own interests instead of the best interests of its students, and the school system failed at every juncture. LCPS displayed a stunning lack of openness, transparency, and accountability, both to the public and the special grand jury about its response to the sexual assaults. According to the report, which also condemned Ziegler for denying at a June 2021 school board meeting that he had any knowledge of the first assault, which occurred in May of that year. The second assault was committed in October of 2021. Ziegler said at the school board meeting, the predator transgender student or person simply does not exist. We don't have any record of assaults occurring in our restrooms. The grand jury report explained the district failed at several points to step in and alter the sequence of events that led to the second assault. That's going to be so expensive. Golly, Mr. Ziegler, are you going to end up in jail? Gosh, I sure hope so. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Today is the 7th day of December, 2022. Over 80 years ago, the Imperial Forces of Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. We will be discussing that coming up in just a couple of moments. But first, there are other days of infamy that we need to address, having to do with our nation and its military. I have said for many, many years, ever since President Obama tried to hijack America's health care from the hands of the people whose health belonged to them and those people they engaged to take good care of it, into the hands of the government. I said that it was a huge and terrible mistake and that it would cost a lot of people their lives and their livelihoods. And I was completely correct, and I remain completely correct. And COVID-19 appeared just in time to reconvince people that the government has no business in any way, shape, or form having anything to do with the health care of American citizens. But not everybody's getting the word. The President of the United States on 60 Minutes said, well, the COVID pandemic is over. Well, apparently not. Certainly not for the American military. We've already discussed how people in the United States military are being set aside, this while recruiting goals are abysmally through the cellar, and people are being separated because they wouldn't take a COVID shot. It is nutty. It's not going to work. These people will be reinstated with back pay. It will happen because, well, this is ridiculous. Especially when you consider that most of the people who wouldn't take the shot didn't take it because it was an emergency experimental drug. Hello? Well, what's interesting about the U.S. military is there is a branch that is not a branch, but is a branch, but is not a branch of the United States military, and that is not the Space Force. It's the Coast Guard. You know, the U.S. Coast Guard used to be a part of the Department of Transportation when there was a Department of Transportation, but then it got roped into the Department of Homeland Security. But there are interesting things having to do with it. U.S. Coast Guard members who are nearing 20 years in military service but have not yet complied with COVID-19 vaccine mandates, and in this case due to religious objections, are now being terminated just before they get to retire. One former service member, Chris Harkins, was formally discharged 5 days ago after serving 19 years exactly in the U.S. Coast Guard. He had orders for retirement January 1, 2024. He had saved up leave days to max out beginning June of 2023. In other words, he was going to start using his terminal leave in June of 2023 and then retire on the first day of January 2024. He was informed 7 months before he would hit the 20-year mark to receive a lifelong monthly pension that he was being discharged over his refusal to get vaccinated due to his sincerely held religious beliefs. Based on your decision, this is a quote, based on your decision to not receive mandatory COVID vaccine as ordered, you have been processed for separation. Read an email to Harkins on October 20th that was obtained by Fox News. Your retirement orders are being canceled as 10 U.S. Code 1176 does not apply to members of the Coast Guard. There is no safe harbor for a Coast Guard member with 18 or more years time in service. You see, in the U.S. military, when you get to be 18 years in, they can't fire you. They can't just separate you for anything other than misconduct. Because it's not fair. It's not right. It's not real. But fortunately, I guess in the ideas of Coast Guard Command, we don't have to worry about that because 10 U.S. Code 1176 doesn't provide safe harbor for any of those people. Harkins, most recently stationed in Juneau, Alaska, managed classified spaces and communications for a two-star admiral. He said he watched other service members with far more serious disciplinary actions taken against them, including accusations of child sexual abuse, reach their 20-year requirement and get the full array of benefits. Harkins, who has a spotless record, zero negative remarks in any of his evaluations or reviews for almost 2 decades, is now ineligible for his retirement. He says this, quote, "I feel targeted by these upper-ranking officers, calling it a passive-aggressive kind of punishment. We're just going to sit you over here in the corner until you essentially comply with the mandate or you're kicked out," unquote. One former active duty service member told Fox News that it's astonishing the military would deny service members their hard-earned benefits at 20 years for seeking religious accommodations to vaccination. He said the military often allows service members to retire out at 20 years and collect their full benefits despite citations for insubordination, sexual harassment, not amounting to rape, and DUIs. The military is suffering from low recruitment and retainment in large part due to its own restrictive policies, including the vaccine requirement. One active duty guardsman who received an intent to discharge notice from the U.S. Coast Guard after serving for nearly 19 years told Fox News he's in limbo waiting to be formally separated, which could happen any day. This is not about readiness, as they state, it's about compliance. They're not willing to look objectively at the facts of, is this really necessary or not? They just want essentially yes men. And if you're not going to be a yes man, they're going to treat you the same or worse than people who got an alcohol incident or DUI or checked out for drugs or something like that. He said his faith and his family are carrying through this. He waits to hear from the U.S. Coast Guard about his separation date. Another still active legacy guardsman who served almost 16 years, whose father was in the U.S. Coast Guard, is now set to be discharged in June of 2023. Given my qualifications, Coast Guard headquarters agreed to allow me to stay for 8 months as an unvaccinated member because they needed me too much. As an unvaccinated service member, I have continued to perform my duties and will continue to faithfully serve to the best of my ability until I'm either discharged or allowed to retire in 4 years. I will say though the military I joined 15 years ago, the one that was revered and desired by many, is now a shell of its former self. Paula Runyon, who was discharged in November after serving for 15 and a half years, told Fox Digital, "My heart is broken. I love my job. I truly love being a storekeeper. I truly loved serving in the Coast Guard. Unfortunately, because how I was treated, I'll never go back. The pressure that this ordeal has put on my wife, my child, and newborn baby is something that we will struggle with for years to come," said Christopher Collins, who served in the Coast Guard for 11 and a half years before also being discharged in November. U.S. Coast Guard has not immediately responded to anybody's request for comments. Coast Guard previously told Fox News Digital no Coast Guard members have been penalized for seeking religious accommodations from the COVID-19 vaccine requirement, while also confirming that it is in the process of discharging many members without approved exemption requests. Harkins called the U.S. Coast Guard action similar to a purge of ethical Christians seeking religious exemptions. Quote, "The Coast Guard has been pushing diversity and inclusion and equality over the last 10 years, like down our throats to the point of choking us on the training. And now where is the diversity, inclusion, and equity? It's because we're Christians. We're not part of that community. And that's how it honestly feels. A purge of moral, ethical Christian people. That's what it feels like." Harkins said, "For the next steps, we're keeping up pressure on our lawsuit. Harkins is involved in a large class action lawsuit that is set to have its first hearing in court December 15th in Galveston, Texas. It's going to be a short trial. These people don't have a chance. I'm talking about people in the United States military that are drumming these people out of service. They don't have a chance. And to be perfectly honest with you, it is as mean-spirited and awful as this article makes it out to be. Now, make no mistake. I took those shots. I talked to people in the military and suggested that they take the shots as well. Because I could sit there and say, I've taken 3 of these shots. I'm fine. I also got COVID-19. These people are not being protected by this vaccine. The vaccine is not stopping the spread of COVID-19. We know this. None of this is happening. The only possible effect of these shots that I took may have been that when I got COVID, it was basically nothing more than a slight cold. That was all it was. By the way, I just got finished with cedar fever. You know, I have a real problem with mountain cedar pollen. That was an order of magnitude worse than dealing with COVID-19. And so these people, I talk to them and I would say, hey, look, it's not so much this. Okay, I've taken these shots. I've had no ill effects. Everything's been fine, you know, so on and so on and so on. It's not so much that. It's what's going to happen to the next group of soldiers. The next medical imperative that the soldiers have to endure. The next experimental drug therapy that they're going to have to deal with. Remember the anthrax vaccine? That made a lot of people sick for a very long time. And that was forced down the throats into the muscles of military members. Arguably, that led to this round of COVID-19 because politics got involved. The president said, everybody's got to take this shot. Everybody's got to. Everyone. Well, wait a minute. I'm the commander-in-chief. I know. I can make it absolutely essential that military members take this shot. And that's where this came from. The guy who was a big proponent of the shot, it doesn't work overly well. The people who actually created the shot, no, we never tested it to see if it would actually stop the transmission of COVID-19. We have no idea whether it will or won't. So you don't know whether the shot actually stops the transmission of COVID-19? No. So it doesn't make any difference whether all of us were wandering around in masks or not, even if we had our shots, because the shots didn't stop the transmission of COVID-19. Right. So everything that we know about COVID-19 is wrong, except that there is a military government mandate that everybody in the military have to take these shots. And if you don't take them, and you don't have a religious exemption and so on and so forth, they're going to take you right out of your career. Well, at least temporarily. Like I'm saying, this isn't going to last long. This is going to be a short trial. These people are going to win. But take a look at this guy that I was just referring to, this Coastie. He's never had a negative remark on any of his records in his entire career, and he's been in the Coast Guard for 19 years? A spotless record? You're kidding. Really? Now, I'll be the first to mention that I am a stiff-necked thistlehead. But in the military service that I've been in, I've been dinged a couple of times. And I kind of deserve both of them, sort of. But to go through an entire 19-year career for the United States Coast Guard, taking all those chances, doing all that work, busting your butt for all those years, not having one angry moment with a commanding officer, I can't do that. And I got proof. Anyway, all we can do is this. We can hope that this madness goes away soon. And we can hope that our governors will please start reading the Constitution again. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. 81 years ago, military aircraft supported by aircraft carriers of the Imperial Navy of Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. 2,409 people lost their lives there. Lou Contour is the subject of this wonderful piece put together by USA Today. He's one of two surviving members of the crew of the USS Arizona, which exploded comprehensively in that attack. Watch this.
Your War and Navy departments present December 7th.
December 7th is a very big day, and the 2,403 military men that were killed that day should get the recognition above everybody. They gave their life and they gave the all. And of those 2,403 men who got killed, 1,177 were on the Arizona shipmates of mine.
By 9:45, the attack was over. 1 hour and 50 minutes of perfidy.
I'd like to be there because there's only two of us still living from the Arizona, and Ken Pott, myself. He lives Provo, Utah, and his legs, he's 6 months older than I am, and his legs are not in good shape. And I talk to him every 2, 3, 4 weeks. We were going every year for years, and my doctor says, getting there, flying there is only a few hours, but getting to the airport and getting up there and sitting around and waiting there, and 8 or 10 hours is too much for you to take at your age. And he said, I don't want you getting sick.
Oh yeah, we'll be here. The family will all be here on the 7th. We'll have we'll watch the ceremony on the TV and everything else. Yeah, it's going to be a sad day, but he's an American hero. Not only is he an American, he's my hero. So it's pretty cool.
They call us heroes, but we're not. The ones that 2,403 men that died are the heroes, and we've got to honor them ahead of everybody else.
Lieutenant Commander Lou Contour, amazing. Yeah, those guys were in a situation where their country had been negotiating with the Imperial Forces of Japan for quite a while, because Japan had moved into China and had done terrible things there. And many people in what we call now the Pacific Rim, New Guinea, Australia, and so on, were very concerned about their future. And so we were negotiating with them, and then all of a sudden somebody came up with this wonderful idea that what they should do is do a preemptive attack on the U.S. 7th Fleet based out of Pearl Harbor. It was a genius naval move. The Imperial Forces of Japan projected power all the way across, or mostly all the way across, the Pacific Ocean and bombed the United States 7th Fleet. The carriers were not there. Everybody at that point was basically focused on capital ships, these big battleships. Well, necessity is the mother of invention. And suddenly, the idea that these ships that carried cannons that fired a projectile about the size of a Volkswagen over 25 miles, pinpoint accuracy, could be supplanted by an aircraft carrier carrying hundreds of planes with even more bombs being flown by human beings hundreds of miles to take out ships, and the entire concept of naval warfare was changed forever. Yamamoto, the supreme commander of the Imperial Forces of Japan, said, I fear that we've awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. He was correct. Because it only would take us a little more than 3 years to destroy 2 world superpowers that could project power. 2 world superpowers we took out on opposite sides of the world. We created the atomic bomb and built the B-29 to deliver it. And when it came time to determine just exactly how we were going to end the war with Japan, and Harry Truman had weapons that would take out a city using just one of them, there wasn't a whole lot of looking over your shoulder for some sort of moment of conscience before he said drop them twice. And they did. And that was the war. I wish people around the world would realize that we're still America and we could still do stuff like that. I know we can, but I wonder if we will. God bless those people. God bless those people who survived that attack and those who didn't. Pearl Harbor Day, 81 years ago. This is the Wells Report. Have a wonderful evening. God bless you and yours. Thanks for being here today. And so, there we go. You're welcome, Gary. That wasn't mine. That was USA Today's. In case you're wondering, I gave him credit, but I just wanted to make sure. But I found it. Thought you'd like to see it. All right, you all. Let's see what else. Weekend. What? I'm going to be playing at. I'm going to be playing at the Dream Tacos in Bedford tomorrow night. Dream Tacos Bedford tomorrow night. Dream Tacos. Did I say have a great weekend? Did I say that? What a dope. I can't believe I said that. I don't know what's going on with me, man. I'm losing it. Any old way. God bless all y'all. And I will see you later. I also said Elon Trump. Don't ask me what's going on. I just got to get some sleep, I guess. Oh, Army-Navy football. Yeah, guess what we'll be doing? All right, that's all I got, people. God bless all y'all. Elon Trump's fault. That's exactly right, John. Thank you.